This is Ask the Experts, small group sessions for English language teachers. Jennifer, hello.
Hey, everybody.
Hi.
Thank you guys for joining me. And I think it's going to be a very productive conversation. Anytime I meet with other teachers, I feel like I'm not just giving, I'm also receiving in return because we're sharing our experiences. And your questions prompt me to reflect more. And I'm grateful for that. So thank you.
Yeah, I definitely understand that feeling.
My question for Jennifer is, how have you started teaching, and how can you get paid for it?
Great.
I think you already
Semla, if you don't mind, we're going to jump right into this question. That's great. We'll come back to you. But it's a great question to start with because
how much.
I am sure that everyone here and everyone else watching would really like to hear Jennifer's response to this question. So Jennifer, I'm just going to
wait a second. I have to put some gas in my yacht, and I need to go to my garage.
I know, and you
back
have
on the Porsche,
and you have your assistant to the left and your assistant to the right.
Let me just tell my maid that I need some quiet.
The first part of the questions that Samara asked Jennifer, and I think it's great because we didn't talk about it so much in Featured Teachers. How did you get started as a teacher? So maybe a little bit about that, and maybe, into the YouTube, how did you decide to do that? And then, it's not about how much do you make. That's not her question, but
how do I stay alive?
Yeah. Well, just how do you, yeah, exactly. How did you start getting, paid for it?
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Good. So the quick version is,
Jennifer.
Yes, hi.
How much is how you? What's the way you get
monetize
paid?
it? Exactly.
Yeah,
No, it's a good question. It's a realistic question. So backing up, I knew back in high school I wanted to teach. I wasn't sure exactly what kind of teacher, but maybe you all had that same experience where first I was deathly afraid of public speaking and whatnot. I was very shy, avoided it at all costs. And then all of a sudden I had no choice. And the first presentation I had to give in front of the classroom, all of a sudden I was up there and I was like, you couldn't shut me up. I was like, this is fun. And I kept going. And this was my high school career. If you give me a presentation for 10 minutes, I go for 15. You give me 20, I go for 30 minutes. It's just, I love being up there and teaching and sharing something. I knew that's where I wanted to be. In college, I decided to start my teacher training, and I got certified to teach Russian as a foreign language in the state of Pennsylvania. So I did my practicum teaching at the high school level. And then I felt like I wasn't ready to really teach Russian because I wasn't fully fluent in it myself. I needed more knowledge. So I went to get my master's. I was completing my master's program that took me over to Moscow. And I fell into the trap of, okay, I was paying for the education, didn't have enough money to eat, need a part-time job. I saw an ad, teach English. I'm like, great, I think I can do that. So I started teaching English on the side. And, thankfully, I did have some teacher training up to that point that I was able to start utilizing, and I just had to transfer it to English. And then circumstances just pushed me onto that path instead. So I became an English teacher while I was living in Russia. I first started private lessons, one-on-one, kids and businessmen. Then I quickly moved into a private school, and I had classes for kids, teens, and adults, continued with some private lessons. I felt it was a good move for various reasons to come back to the U.S. I found work eventually. It was not easy. I was right after 9/11. No one was hiring. But I found work in an IEP, an intensive English program. I started out as a substitute teacher, then a full-time teacher, and I took on more tasks like administration, teacher training. Then, thankfully, I was in a position to contribute in-house materials, which caught the attention of a publisher. And then I got invited to start writing textbook materials. So that was a branch, a way to branch out that way. But then between writing textbook materials, becoming a mom, I was at home, and it became possible for me to start teaching at home online. Initially, there was absolutely no profit whatsoever. I missed teaching. I was a mom, I was at home, I finished my textbook contract, and I also had this feeling I don't want to go back to my full-time job. I had tried, it was very difficult with a baby. then the second one was coming along, and it just made more sense for me to stay at home and try to make things work. I did YouTube not out of a pursuit of profit. There was no mention
No,
that YouTube would even be monetized.
no.
I just did it because I wanted to teach. I missed teaching, and I wanted to do it somehow. So I started posting videos on YouTube, and within a couple of years, I decided, I do need to make some money again and contribute to the household income. So I started offering private lessons through Skype, and that grew into, private lessons, sometimes courses. Other people approached me with different different ways to grow, often contributing content to other sites. So that initial platform of YouTube has given me exposure, thankfully, and opportunities have come to me because YouTube is basically my portfolio. You can see what I do, what I teach, who I am, and then people become interested and then do the research of who is she and what is she doing, what else can we ask her to do. So that's how I basically became the online teacher that I am today, thankfully. How am I keeping it all going is through multiple sources. That's the only way I've been able to keep it going. So as I said, I mentioned private lessons through Skype. I now also work on Zoom. So private lessons is a major source of income for me. And it's also so very important because as much as I love video making, I want the live interaction with with students. I want to be connected to real students with real lesson plans, outcomes, and so I just couldn't limit myself to video making, which is a form of teaching, but it's not the real-time interaction that I want to keep my skills up as a teacher. So that's what I do. Small private lessons, small group classes, and then a lot of content creation for third parties has kept me going. And I blog. I've been blogging since 2008, and I've been very thankful and grateful for that opportunity. I'm just very fortunate. Again, YouTube gave me exposure, and I landed a blogging job for a publisher. So the blog is sponsored. So multiple sources of income. There's no one source that would put food on the table. It's a combination.
Daniela, do you have a question?
Yeah. Well, now actually, my question seems to connect to yes. So so basically, I've got two questions actually. Number one, how did you overcome your possible shyness, if any, of getting yourself exposed internationally? Because on YouTube you are possibly seen by anybody. And number two, how do you manage to stay connected to your creativity? How do you manage to organize? Because I find that during my school year, my creativity gets drained, sort of. It stays active, but at the same time, it doesn't give me the time to actually produce something concrete. It remains there, but not. I can't put it in paper, sort of, or on the screen. Let's say.
Yes. It's such a good question, and I don't know what opportunity we have to branch this out. I want to address all questions, but boy, that's an interesting question that could go for 50 minutes itself. Creativity, and I think this also connects to the issue of burnouts. Now, some of you, who is it? Samara is a 2-year mark. Jace and I are well over the 20-year mark. Even around the 5-year mark, you can face your first phase of burnout. Teacher burnout is a real issue. And the drain is a real issue. How do you keep it up? You need to take care of yourself. Remember that. Take care of yourself. I've had to be careful not to take on too much, not to say yes to too many projects. I'm still learning the balance with that. But one of the things that I think is both a strength and a weakness is that I am completely independent and I do what I want and what I feel is right, which means that I don't lock myself into one project and one format. Even on YouTube, I have experimented broadly. I have some playlists where I'm teaching in front of a whiteboard, some playlists I'm teaching with students. Sometimes I'm outside, sometimes I'm in my kitchen. A lot of the time I'm just up against the wall because that's all I have time to do is to set up the camera and film that way because then there's like 10 plus hours of production and editing to still do. I love exploring and experimenting with my formats and with my topics. I listen to students, I hear their needs, I try to meet those needs in different ways. If there are certain formats that work, I try to keep them to some degree, but I also even shake that up, otherwise it gets boring to me. So if you look at a playlist, eventually I start tweaking it and changing it, usually for the better, but also to keep things fresh for myself. So I think to avoid burnout, you have to experiment and not just keep doing the same thing. Although, again, it's balanced. There's times where I had some things going on business-wise, plus, you know, my responsibilities as a mom. I felt this is what I can do. I can produce these kinds of videos for the next few months every other week, and that's all I can do. And I'm limited, and I have to be satisfied with what I'm able to produce given the circumstances. So also go easy on yourself. You're not always going to be at the top of your game all 12 months, all weeks of the year. You do your best, and you're going to have your moments where you peak and that was really creative, or your moments to shine, or that was a great presentation, but you're not always going to be there all the time. You shoot for it, you aim for it, but I don't think you're there all the time. Jace might agree with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but keeping it fresh for yourself and for your students, and changing things up definitely helps. And listening to your students, getting inspired by them, not just listening to their needs and interests, but they inspire me, and I'm sure your students inspire you too. And I let that inspiration guide me to try new things. So that's the creativity part of it. The other part, remind me, what was the first part?
How did you overcome your weakness, your shyness?
It's so, you know, if any of you have done you know, the traditional classroom teaching, and then a lot of us, maybe it's only recently through the pandemic, you've been forced to transition online, but Jace and I, you know, coming from a traditional classroom and then going into video, you do have to figure out what you can transfer and what you can't. And what I usually tell new teachers who want to go online, and especially doing video making on Instagram or YouTube, is to remind them, first of all, you're already a teacher. You have the skills, and you have the content, so you know how to teach. You just have to figure out how to do it in front of a camera. Right. And it's just a different thing. So it takes some practice. And again, you've seen me grow and transition and experiment over the past 10 plus years on YouTube. A lot of my early videos, I feel like, were textbooks come to life. That was just the way I was transferring, like, oh, we don't have a textbook. Okay, I'll recreate one. And so I feel a lot of my early videos are very formulaic in that way. And my delivery sometimes was a little bit less relaxed. Also, I was quite tense because I knew, like, in those first year or two, I had to film when my kids were asleep or at like daycare, and I had this window, and I was pressured, like, turn on the camera, you got to get it right. And I was like, okay, hi everybody, I'm Jennifer. Like, and I'm teaching my lesson, and the pressure of time took away my relaxation sometimes. But I think it's also the encouragement. If you just tap into the best parts of you, and I think we're all adults, and you have this self-awareness, and you know who you are and what you're willing to share. I'm not opening up my entire life and all of my personal life to my viewers, but I am opening up to some degree. And if you guys do that in your classrooms, how else do you connect with your students if you don't open yourself up to that connection? And that's what I do in my videos. There are times when I'm a little more personal, times when a lot more personal, and times where I'm just, I'm a bit more professional, but not cold. It's always my goal to be that sort of friendly, helpful person, not your best friend, but a friendly, helpful person to guide you in your language studies. And so when I realize I'm doing this, and at the end of the camera or on the other side of the camera is somebody just so eager for my help and guidance, it relaxes me. When I look at a camera, I think of some of my students. I think of people who've written to me and who are struggling and with their own shyness and difficulties, or my private students. And so I imagine who is that, concrete people watching, and that relaxes me. And I don't think about the camera, I think about the people and why I'm doing this.
I have to jump in here because I really think that's important. And if any of you are thinking about doing anything, you know, online with videos or a blog, I think there's something really special about someone that you don't have in a classroom, that, you know, didn't sign up with you in a traditional way, or you didn't get the student in the traditional, sense, like that just, sees your video or reads your blog and, oh, thank you, you really encouraged me, like someone from another country, I think that's really validating. And I understand what Jennifer's saying, because I've had the same experience that can really make you feel like, okay, I can do this, so that, and relax. And what you're saying, it can really relax you, because that person, didn't see you in the classroom. That person felt that from just that thing you did in your bedroom with a camera. It's like, wow, if that person felt something and can benefit from it, then I should keep going. I should keep doing it.
Yeah. And from the very beginning, I mean, I started getting messages and emails on YouTube 2007, 2008, the very beginning. And that's what prompted me to continue, because people were writing like they'd never had that kind of contact, that kind of support before, with a qualified teacher, for free at the beginning. But it just was really encouraging for me, and understanding the need out there for quality instruction and support from a teacher, and that's what it's. Their struggles are more real than any bit of shyness that I might have, and it gives me the courage to rise up to the challenge, because I know people are depending on the resources that I'm providing.
Just one quick thing, and I promise I won't jump in this much every time, but I do want to say that if you're thinking right now, you who are here or anyone watching this, well, that's great, Jennifer, Jace, that you had that, but if I'm not sure I could do a YouTube channel and get people to really watch what I do and all that, you could also just a Facebook group or a WhatsApp group. Like if you're sharing stuff and you get people like saying, oh, thank you. And, it's a different feeling than in the classroom. I think we want both of those things, but there really is something in media, whether it's like that quick thing, like, oh, thank you for that tip, or that, that doesn't, it's just a different feeling. And you don't have to be Jennifer to do
and you
that.
No.
When I say you don't have to be Jennifer, I'm also mean, in that time in 2007 when she's, things are different on YouTube, and it's a different world in media. But what I'm saying is, like, the great thing is that feeling of being able to help people, it's possible for any teacher who gets into media, whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's on WhatsApp. I see it all the time. People, there's, everyone's welcome. You can always help people that are not necessarily in your physical classroom. You really can.
And I'll remember, I don't want to digress too much, but this reminds me, if you are thinking of making videos, just, again, be yourself. And I asked Jace this question, and we have a mutual friend and colleague, Vicky of Simple English Videos. And I asked them, like, who do you tap into? Who is your inner rock star? And it was an interesting exercise, because we all identified with different people, which means we're all capable of delivering instruction in front of a camera, but we have very different personalities. And that's okay. That's the way it should be. So, Jace, you're saying, was it... the guy from the guy from Truman Show with Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey, who's full of life and animated, expressive, and like I think he's terribly entertaining. I think hilarious, and I love him. But I have nothing in common with him. I can't be Jim Carrey. Jace is the kind of presenter with energy and the expressions. I can't be Jace, and I shouldn't be, because that's who he is. So if you had to identify someone, then perhaps Jim Carrey is his inner rock star. And our colleague said Marcel Marceau, the mime, because she likes to use hand motions, which is very subdued, but also very effective. And I was saying my inner rock star is Fred Rogers, who a TV show host for children. And the more I thought about it, I said, yes, that's who I am. He was not known for being cool or flashy. He was very low key. Some people might have said, hey, he's boring. And I've heard that before. I've heard she's boring. But you know what? I can't be what everybody wants me to be. I can be me, and I can deliver my presentation as me. Hopefully the majority of people will accept it, learn from it, and then I'll be thankful for that. But I am like Mr. Rogers. I want to be your friendly neighbor. I'm not here to be anyone's best friend, but I will be your friendly neighbor, offering you support and a warm welcome as best I can. So that's my inner rock star.
Perfect. We can come back to what Daniela and Salma are talking about and the way they connected, but let's go over to Selma now. Selma,
Yeah, I prepared the question, how can I improve my academic vocabulary? But kind of, I'd like to ask more questions too.
Sure.
First, you said you need courage. Yeah, I agree with that. But we are in Turkey and we actually didn't get a real education about English because, as you know, teaching ways, teaching methods are really different. For example, in Turkey, we can't speak in front of people.
Mm.
We are just scared of speaking because we feel like, I don't know, we are going to speak wrong, not accurate, not fluent.
Mhm.
So, I don't know. And we need courage. How can I get it?
How can you get it?
Yeah, how can I get it?
Through exposure and opportunities and seeking them out, and they are there. You find the speaking opportunities, connecting with others, engaging in events like this, so that it becomes more familiar and common to you. It's like somebody on YouTube who says, "This is my first comment. I've never commented before," and I'm like, "Thank you that you felt comfortable enough to do it on my video, and hopefully it will lead to more." And I'm really excited when I see people from week to week. I start recognizing names. I know who the regulars are, and now they're regular commenters. The point is, if they can do it through comments, you need to do it through speaking opportunities. Seek them out. One of the places I'm on is Hollow. I do large live streams, and I do that. And among my followers and subscribers on Hollow are teachers. I have a couple of teachers in my subscriber groups who come to my live streams. They are EFL teachers, and they want their speaking practice. They want to be with me, they want to be with others, and they want to practice speaking English on a regular basis.
It
And
will
so,
be really great.
so seeking those kinds of opportunities, that's just one example. But making sure that you're also reading enough and listening enough. I often get that question from upper level students. For example, like on Hollow, I often recommend a number of resources. I don't know if anyone's familiar. Let's see if I can put some things in the chat for you.
You see, I'm sharing my screen now so people can see the Hollow. If you don't know Hollow.
Yeah, but there's lots of free resources. One of them is readtheory.org. These are sources that resources I recommend to students as well. And we're all learners, but if you yourself are an English language learner, of course you want to keep up your own language skills, and not just keep them up, but develop them. And why I recommend Read Theory is because it's a free resource. You go, they test it out, and then every time you go into the site, they will give you a text at your level. And then there are questions for comprehension. So of course it's nice to go to news sites and to blog posts and you're reading, but there's no one to question you. And when you go to a site like Read Theory and there are questions, well, now you're holding yourself accountable. If you're going to recommend this kind of resource to some of your own students, can you do it yourself? And how do you score? That's one thing.
About reading means sorry for interrupting, but about reading, no problem. Or writing, no problem. But when I listen to you, I can understand everything what you say. And when it's time to answer the question or say something, I feel like I don't know English. That's my problem. But actually, I get it. What you say, what you mean, all words, all vocabs, but nothing for replying.
So the point is, but I do still recommend reading. A lot of people come to me, both as followers or private students, wanting to work on their conversation skills, but I never feel that speaking is completely isolated from the others. A lot of them base our conversation lessons on something they've read or something they've listened to. For example, so let's say they read an article, and then when we meet, it begins with a summary, an oral summary. Then we can have the discussion, and following that might be a recorded version of their summary, because now they've practiced it once with me, they can do it as a recording for homework, or they already did a great job with a summary, and that 1 minute recording is a 1 minute reaction. These are exercises you guys can do as well. Okay, so you've read an article, and there's no one to talk to. Well, guess what? You got your phone, you got a recording app on there. So challenge yourself. Do you know that, like, there's different ways of doing it, but let's call it 3, 2, 1. Let's say when you give yourself 3 minutes and you do your summary of the article, and the first time you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to say. I can't remember the points. I don't know if I remember all the key words. That wasn't great. All right, I'm going to do this recording again, but I'm going to give myself 2 minutes. I'm feeling a little more confident. I remember most of the key points. I think I can do this better. Now I'm going to do the 1 minute summary of the article, and this one should be better. The idea is that you are putting yourself through the steps that you would recommend to your own students, but at your level, of course, it's at a higher level. Most of you are probably teaching, beginners and intermediates, but as advanced speakers, you should be challenging yourself to do these advanced type of exercises. If you read an article, can you summarize it? How well can you summarize it? And give yourself a chance to succeed. That's what I tell students too. Of course, you're not going to be happy with the first recording. That's why you're not going to send me the first recording. But I also tell the students, please don't record 50 times. I don't want you to attempt this 50 times. Maybe maximum 5. I don't want the perfectionist to sit there all night until they get that perfect recording to share with me. But the process of limiting the time and recording recreates a little bit of that pressure. And if you learn to work under that pressure, that helps you develop that confidence and courage for real life situations.
What Jennifer's talking about, there are 2 things that are really important that don't happen when, for example, Selma, somebody says, hey, Selma, what do you think about this? And all of a sudden, like, the light is on Selma, and it's like, wait, why can't I speak the way I listen and I read? And what Jennifer's talking about, the 2 things that are different, there's repetition. So you're repeating, you're trying again, right? You're doing it a few times. That is missing from when someone says, hey, what do you think about this? The other thing is the structure. It's like, it's sort of, you're okay, I'm going to record this, I'm going to practice, I'm going to do it. Like, all of that, it's sort of paradoxical. You think, well, that's so prescribed and structured. Yeah, but you can't be spontaneous without that. Like, it's like you can't perform piano in front of people before you've played the same piece many times and you've, made mistakes. Like, the practice has to happen. So you can't judge how well, like, why can't I speak English when I can understand this and read this? That's comprehension. It's not about what you can understand. The production happens with a lot of repetition and a lot of what Jennifer's talking about, kind of structured. I'm going to try this. You gain confidence and you get to that point, like an actor, learning their lines to go on stage. It's very different from improvising. You can't improvise until you have a base of a foundation of the language. You just can't do it.
And I do believe there's different types of speaking exercises that can build the confidence. If you're doing the summary, okay, the content is basically there, but you're sort of formatting it into a packaged way that but you kind of know what to say because the key points you just read. So now you just need to recall them and express them and keep the organization that you found in the article. Other things are just, sort of reading scripts, whether it's a TED Talk and you open up the transcript or it's a movie or a TV show. We all know about the strategies of shadowing. And what I tell about students is like limited chunks of language so that you can repeat it. And again, these are things that we tell our students. These are things that you can do too as an English language learner continuing. So I do oral reading. I say oral reading. Now, for lower level students, I often guide them to my YouTube series. It's based on the general service list, and the texts are very, very easy, A1, A2, possibly B1. But with a lot of my advanced private students, we might do an oral reading passage from an article that they read. So if there's an article that they read, they come in, they might summarize it for me, we discuss it, then there's the homework of summarizing, reacting. But another portion might be taking an excerpt, a very short excerpt from that article, and they read it aloud to me. They also have my recording as a model and theirs. So it's like that kind of freedom from having to think, what am I saying? And just focusing on the pronunciation, the articulation, and saying them as if they are your words also builds confidence, so that when you've practiced summarizing, you've practiced your reaction, you've practiced reading a key paragraph multiple times, now put it aside and say, okay, now let's talk about this issue again. free, open. You should have the confidence now because you've done a summary, you've done a recorded reaction, you've read a paragraph aloud. A lot of the vocabulary should be familiar at this point, at least enough key vocabulary to start speaking more freely on that topic. So it's about giving yourself the opportunities to build that confidence and build the vocabulary, the language that you will need to talk about that. And so there you go. You need to keep that study plan in place so that each week you're moving on to a different topic. If you really want to build your confidence, it can't be limited to everything about the coronavirus. Okay, people want to talk about it, but eventually, conversation goes off to somewhere else because we don't want to talk about it 24/7 anymore. I got that in with my private students. Initially, okay, they wanted to talk about pandemic-related things. Then they get to the point of like, can we talk about something else? Like, yes. So one of the articles this week that a number of students have done is, what type of shopper are you? Let's talk about the psychology of consumers. And I had at least 2 students have like, this is fun. Like, yes, well, let's not talk about coronavirus anymore right now. So you do have to challenge yourself to move into different topics. TED Talks are great because they are so varied. So it pulls you in different directions. So there are things that you could be doing with TED Talks: watching, shadowing, summarizing. I have an advanced student who watches all of it and gives me a summary, a very concise summary of it. Then we discuss it, right? And keep up your writing too. The writing is also good because writing, unlike conversation, gives you the chance to think. So writing a short reaction allows you to put the language together so that, again, before perhaps you do your recorded reaction, maybe you should do a written reaction first, not so that you have a script, but so that a lot of the language is ready to go. Now you can sort of go off script, but the vocabulary and some of the grammar is in place so that when you press record, you can feel quite confident moving into your recorded reaction or your recorded summary.
Great stuff. I have a feeling we're going to get back to some of this in the other questions. I want to move on.
Okay.
Do you have a question tonight?
Yes. Actually, I would like to say thank you to Jennifer, and also the host. This is an opportunity that I've been waiting for a long time. You know, I've been following Jennifer since 2007.
Wow.
Wow.
A long time
Thank you.
ago.
Thank
Yes.
you.
And I guess in Africa, I was even the first person to follow Jennifer.
Thank you.
Yeah, to the time, of course, 2007 was the beginning when no one knows that there is
Jennifer.
or something interesting on YouTube.
Wow.
All my friends knew that it was all about music, all about, but I was trying to find out if there is kind of lesson. And the first person comes on my screen was Jennifer. And since then, I've been following Jennifer as long as I can. Although there were sometimes very difficult times to follow or to have internet. And we didn't have even at home internet like this. So the one thing that defines Jennifer is creativity.
Thank you.
Since day one, I know from the refrigerator, how I can offer something. So even there's something else I did like. It was the Jennifer podcast. The podcast.
I did that.
Teaching etiquette. Yes.
Yes.
Everybody copied all of these things. All copied. They all did the same thing. Yeah.
I'm really happy today that I have this opportunity to see her face to face. This is like a dream come true. I've been trying to find out how can I get her to see her face to face.
That's great to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. So my question is about delivering strategy. I know you try to make things a little bit very interactive, very interacting with the people, even though they're not, you use video, but you interact with the people. This is something that I learned from you. You try to make it real. You try to make it very practical. What kind of methodology or strategy or learning delivery, teaching delivery do you use? This is the steps, the strategy of step one, step strategy.
Like delivering an effective lesson.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. And can it be video, virtual, or just anything, or?
Yeah,
because
even if it is face to face, how do you plan? Okay, I know there is planning lesson and the
yeah,
delivery.
but it is hard, and you do have to adjust. And I'm a person who loves to experiment. Like I said, that's probably my downfall because I love experimenting and being creative. So I don't always stick to things enough. But now I'm on Hollow, and I've never done this before. I mean, I've done group lessons, but goodness, when you teach, you usually know who your students are, who's going to show up, what their level is. You've agreed on things. And when I do live streams, I don't necessarily know who's going to be there. The levels are mixed, totally mixed. I might have, like when I first did some live streams, it could have been like, 50, but no, but the live streams are normally like 200 plus people. I went as high as 500 once. And then you're bringing people on camera with you one at a time. Now it's up to 4 at a time. And these kinds of live streams are really challenging. Plus the technical issues of people, you can't hear them sometimes, or there's background noise. Whoa. So there's a lot of different factors that you deal with from platform to platform. I love private instruction. I really love tailoring the lesson to that student. I love it. I love private teaching. Sometimes I've paired people up. I've done that before too. Group classes are fun. And I do miss the traditional classroom at times, but I love private teaching and developing a long-term relationship with my students and earning their trust and really seeing them to their goals. And so being aware of who I'm teaching and what their goals are influences absolutely everything. Among private students, I might have, different working professionals, certain people preparing for different types of exams, from an interpreter exam to, academic essay that they have to do. Those are just some of the current things that I'm working on with students. But you need a plan. Even when I do my big live streams, I have a basic plan in place. Now with private students, it is more like traditional lesson planning. And as you know, when you're first starting to teach or you have to present a lesson plan to your supervisor, you have the topic, the objective, the duration of each thing, and the materials needed, the format for each of your exercises. As you get along and you move out from under someone's supervision, you don't have such a detailed lesson plan anymore. But you still always should have the objective. What is this lesson plan about, and why are you doing it? I think the key in anything I do, whether it's a private lesson or like a big, large live stream on Hollow, is the flexibility, because you just have to learn how to adapt. There are things that come up, questions, comments. So flexibility is key. Keeping in mind what your objective is, but embracing some of those learning opportunities along the way that pop up, knowing how much of a digression is okay and how much is too far off the path. You learn that with time, but still keeping in mind, what is the objective? What are we moving towards? Being prepared. If you're not prepared, you just don't do as well, right? Even when I go on Hollow, I think, okay, what is my list of games? I'm going to do games today. Which games, right? Or if I'm going to be teaching conjunctions, I know the fanboys, you know the fanboys, but I better just quickly, in my mind, what are they again? And okay, then what are the subordinating conjunctions? Which ones do I want to prioritize? You have to go over it. If it is not a topic that you've taught before, and this happened in the early days on YouTube when a lot of young teachers were seeing my lessons for the first time, they're watching it to say, like, I'm teaching this next week and I'm watching your presentation to help me prepare, because they needed to review the present progressive or reported speech because they're teaching it next week. And so, in those early years, there is a lot of preparation that involves the research, reviewing that content, especially the grammar, or if it's a set of vocabulary, if you're teaching those 10 words in a lesson, are you sure you know the pronunciation and the grammar and the collocations? So there's a lot of that preparation that goes into place. As you become more experienced, a lot of that, thank God, is already in your head. So there's less of that research thankfully. But you also can't fall into the trap of assuming that, oh yeah, present progressive, got it, because usually then in the middle of a lesson, a question comes up, I'm like, yeah. So, and you're caught off guard. So then you have to remember that it is okay not to have the answer sometimes. And you just have to be frank with a student and just say, you know what, I'll get back to you on that. And this happens actually quite frequently on the Hollow live streams, because I get questions left and right. And it's like a test every single week of how much does Jennifer know and how much can she answer on the spot right now. Like I got asked about notwithstanding. I'm like, oh my gosh, I never used the word notwithstanding. What kind of part of speech is it? Have your plan, know your objective, be flexible, come prepared. If there are any materials that you need, they got to bring them. Like when I go teach my students on camera for my basic English lesson, I film at their apartment. Going into the apartment, I have a checklist of what I need to bring, not just my equipment, but wait a second, this activity that I'm going to do has flashcards. Did I make the flashcards yet? Got to get your materials, do any research to make sure you're prepared to teach the stuff, be ready for follow-up. You know, if you don't cover everything you intended to, or just to confirm that they did reach the objective, how are you going to measure that? So what are the follow-up exercises you're going to do? Be ready to revise on the spot. That's a great lesson plan, is the flexibility. Sometimes you have to readjust. You plan to do your presentation and go into the activity, but boom, they're not even digesting half of it. So you need to back up and you have to re-strategize. Maybe I need to do like a focused activity to confirm these parts, and then we'll go into production. Oops, the production wasn't as much successful, so I better back up and do a mini presentation, then some more focused practice, and back into production. So you have to have that flexibility. And I also think, and that somebody I think is going to be asking about emotions, but you know, you can't just teach to the vacuum out there. You're teaching to human beings, and you always constantly need to be aware of how they're digesting it and how they're reacting to you. This is the hardest part of a live stream. Out of 200-300 some people watching, I don't know their states. I don't know always how I'm being received, but at least the people on camera can, or I'm trying to watch camera, watch the comments because I'm, you know, and to gauge, are they getting it? It's really hard with those numbers. But in a classroom setting and with a private student, certainly with the camera and, you know, their performance, I can keep track of not just how are they digesting the language, but I need to make sure that, you know, emotionally this is all good, that I'm not losing them, they're not frustrated, they're on task. So I think being in tune with the students' emotional state is also key from beginning to end. Another thing I'll throw in here is giving students a sense of ownership, so important. Definitely can do with private students. I mean, it's so tailored. I can't reuse one thing with another student completely. It's always tailored. And even if a number of students basically at the same level are doing conversation, I might prepare a list of topics for that week, and then I let students choose from that list of topics. So it's a limited number that I can prepare in advance regardless of what they choose, but their final choice is theirs. I'm not telling them that you're going to read about shoppers. If you don't want to talk about consumer psychology, then maybe you're going to choose something else about defunding police. So I try to have that range of topics that they choose from so they have a sense of ownership of their studies. At the live streams, the topics are chosen by subscribers. So always allowing for a degree of choice and for their input and letting them have feedback, a lot of feedback.
I'm going to stop you here just because I want to make sure in the interest of time that we get to Chavito and Ellie's question. So excellent. Thank you, Amani. And Chavito, how about you? Do you have a question for Jennifer?
Yes, of course, please. I would like to know how can I boost my students' learning, because it seems like there's a point in which they seem to be stuck. I don't know, it's like between the level A1, A2, or to go from A2 to B1. And how can I avoid the fossilization of their mistakes?
A lot of production. You know, I think it's much easier. Those of us who are freelance and we have a lot of freedom to go at the pace that the student needs is wonderful. When you're teaching in a school setting and it's week 1 is chapter 2, week 2 is chapter 3, and you're pushing on and the student's like, whoa, wait a second, I still don't get the endings here on all these irregular verbs, and can we go back? And no, because it's week 4 and we're in unit 4 now. So that's rough. That's rough when you're locked into that kind of curriculum. But if you have the freedom to, you know, go at their pace, that's key, and allowing for a lot of production. So I'd say like A1, A2, B1, you're building grammar. Grammar is the framework. They need the framework. So a lot of it I feel is grammar based. But if you watch what I'm doing in my basic English series on YouTube, it's grammar through conversation. So we don't have a textbook, and all of the grammar is through production. now what you see in the videos is edited, but even off camera there's more production, but it's trying to get them to use it right away. Some of it is, a lot of it is focused and guided and controlled, and then little by little I try to pull that control away so it's more open, it's more communicative, it's more productive rather than controlled. So I think you are guided by the grammar, but make sure you're having a lot of production, not just written but a lot of spoken, because I feel like the students feel like, hey, if I'm speaking and using it, I really know this, you know, and letting them talk about real things, you know, having like Q&A, go back and forth, having them talk not just to me but to each other, asking questions is important, and give them opportunities to see their progress so they also realize that they are making progress is important. With those two YouTube students, it's actually quite easy because those videos that I'm sharing now were filmed a few months ago, so they're able to say like, oh wow, yeah, I remember that, and I can do better now. I know how to form those questions in the past progressive. But I'd say, like, you know, a lot of production and as much speaking time as possible is key. Can you have them speak not just to you but to each other? Give them the speaking tasks. Like sometimes it's not just even the live speaking tasks, but it's recorded speaking tasks, because you want to encourage a lot of that production. Vocabulary is going to be key. So if grammar is the framework, it's like, you know, in my mind I see this Christmas tree. There's the skeleton, then you put on all the ornaments, you know. Vocabulary, that's like the ornaments, that's where it gets fun. So the grammar is just like the skeleton, the framework, but what you're going to flesh it out with is the vocabulary. So you got to work in vocabulary into the studies, and make sure again that you're giving them chance for production. The passive vocabulary is always going to be bigger than the active, but it's up to you to guide them to use a lot of that vocabulary, expose them to that vocabulary so that the passive words can become more active.
Fantastic. Wow, great. Mr. English Cool, El Salvador via California, call center guru. You have a question, sir.
Hello, everybody. I see, okay, so I see Samara. Where's Samara from? Where's she?
Brazil.
São Paulo, Brazil.
Brazil. So we have Brazil in the house. And Jennifer sounds California-ish. Are you from California, Jennifer?
I've heard that before. No, I'm an East Coast gal. Pennsylvania is my home state, and I'm in Massachusetts.
You showed up late, so I'm just going to give you the summary. Chavito's in Ecuador. Amani is from Burundi, but he's in Egypt. And Daniela is in Italy. Daniela, tell me again, which part of Italy? I've forgotten.
Northeast, Venice.
Northeast, okay, yeah.
Okay, cool.
So go ahead,
Okay,
man.
well, I'm in El Salvador, and nice to meet you, Jennifer. I have seen your videos, and I've seen your videos have changed a little bit. I don't know if it's like the new trend, because I see a lot more TPRS now, more of the CLT has gotten more popular. And I started doing the communicative approach with the schools that I started with, because I went into teaching without knowing really grammar. So I just knew how to talk. So because the academy, okay, you're like a native speaker, so come teach English to these guys over here. And I got away with that for a while. And then the students started asking me grammar questions. And once they started asking me grammar questions, you know, I had to kind of play it off, and then I had to go, you know, update my grammar, learning about grammar. So
good for you.
But at the same time, even then I was teaching students and they were learning how to talk, but their grammar was not the best. So I feel like it's always a balance that you have to be able to do. And what we do at our school is we explain, there's different, the language is not just speaking. I mean, we have pronunciation, we have writing, we have reading, we have listening skills. So if you learn how to do that, that kind of helps out in the beginning. And I'm hearing, well, it was actually the lady that just left, that she's having problems. What it sounded like is that she wants to practice more. And
yes.
With our students, El Salvador has a big tourism. We're having, well, before we were not known for the best things, but right now the tourism is spiking because of surf or whatever. Either way, so I tell my students, either you work at a call center or you get yourself involved in tourism to expose yourself with people who are either native speakers or speak English. So that's pretty much what I recommend is to, like you were saying, to find ways to put yourself at service where you have to use your English. But the question I guess I have for you, Jennifer, as far as your basic students, it sounds like you already answered it by saying you're not really going by a book, and we don't go by a book either. Right now, in a little bit, I have my class, and I have my lesson plan set up actually with my tabs on my computer. So I already know where I have everything. And I know as far as my objective is either I'm gonna work today on pronunciation, and I'm gonna work a little bit of grammar, and then just let's talk. Like, what did you eat this morning? Oh yeah, how was it? Was it good? Maria, what did she say? And I just work it. I work it. And AJ Hoban, what I'm getting at with AJ Hoban and other people, teachers that have more experience than I have, is that I didn't know I was doing it correctly. It was by chance or by luck. It's like after I started watching it, okay, I've been doing that. Okay, I haven't. So by luck, I've been learning also. My luck has been that what I've been teaching, the way I've been teaching, would be like, it's difficult for some of my teachers that I hire because they're very square and they're very by the book, that I have to explain to them, relax with that, relax with your grammar. It's too much grammar and they're not getting it. Like, it's too much. Have them, talk about simple stuff. And it's difficult because they've been trained to teach by the book. So they have to they feel that my style is very loose. So they feel it's like, dude, Eddie, your style is like, but I have my time. I have my 3 months to 4 months for them to be able to talk already and go into intermediate where everybody's already talking. I'm not speaking Spanish as much as in my basic classes. So anyways, I heard it.
No, I think so. But, I do have to say, though, when I was in the traditional classroom setting, textbooks were given to me. You have to teach from the book. But luckily, I was the kind of teacher who would always keep adding and like tweaking and doing that. And I think that's what a lot of teachers do. If you have that desire for creativity and freedom, like you sort of work within the box and you stay within the box, but you sort of bring some things in, change things around. It does guide you. I mean, the books are very helpful. There's research that goes into the books. Having been a textbook writer, I say that there's worth in a book. But it's there. You also want to bring supplemental material. You want to change things around, add exercises, because you want to be in tune with the people that you're teaching. And there's no one-fit-all method or one-fit-all resource. You have to be flexible and be able to adapt it. But I'm not going to disrespect textbooks entirely, because I think there's a lot that goes into it, and they are a helpful guide. But I think it's worth then sort of adapting as you go along. When you're in tune with your students and their needs and their interests, you can always build off of it and tweak things and skip things. So that said, but I do think, yes, a lot of spoken production is very helpful, especially in what you're doing, because these people need to be able to speak very soon in call centers over the phone. So they need the listening and speaking and pronunciation. But I would still say that, if they totally miss out on reading and writing, it's not going to come together completely. Those people who read and write, they got the foundation. Students who come to me as private students and the ones who have done a lot of reading already, I can see that a lot of the foundation is there. And there's there's some things that we have to adjust. Yes, there's some fossilization, but the foundation is there because they took the time to give attention to reading and writing. And so then we need to continue that reading and writing.
We have our books, and we send our new students, a PDF. It's basically all digital now, and we send them our PDF, and we explain to them like certain topics. Like today, right now the class I have next is WH questions, and I already have my little cartoon. I already have my what chapters in the book they can find if they want to work on it after. And at the same time, I have students who came from the U.S. and they speak broken English. And then that's another challenge, fixing English, the broken English, because you understand it. Go ahead.
No, I just argue though that there's some people who are resistant to grammar, and maybe they're resistant because they perceive grammar as like workbook exercises. Exercise A, questions 1 through 10. Exercise B, questions 1 through 10. Fill in the blank, circle the answer. It does get kind of routine. The way that you can change it is you take that basic exercise, and maybe like in a classroom where everything can be physical, you prepare cards. Like I love sorting tasks. I've done that in some of the YouTube lessons with my basic students. So let's say, like a sorting task. it could be the pronunciation of the ed past tense ending. Which ones sound like D? Which one sounds like T? Which ones add an extra syllable? Can they sort the words based on the pronunciation, sort them into 3 groups? Or can they sort words into parts of speech? Maybe they don't know the terms adjective, noun, verb, but can they instinctively group words together? These are together because they're like stuff you do. It's like, yes, actions. Right? Then, okay, this is like describing words, right? We call them adjectives. Even if you don't use the terminology, you can do that kind of sorting task, and you're confirming. I mean, that's just one possible example, but you can teach grammar in a way that doesn't overwhelm them with the terminology and doesn't seem so rigid. But if they have inaccuracies, there needs to be direct attention to grammar to clean those inaccuracies up. You can't just keep going along and assume they're going to pick it all up. They won't. Right. I believe that there are times when direct attention to grammar is necessary.
Yeah, let me jump in also, because we do have to stop in a few minutes, everybody. So, but I just want to say, the thing about reading that all of us have to remember is that when you're reading, what's happening, if you're reading something at or below your level, if you're reading something at your level or above, then what you're doing is, looking up words. You're working on comprehension skills. You're not working on, as I said earlier a little bit, like reading for fluency, reading to actually remember what those collocations, the grammar. So, if you're not reading this way, what happens is, if you're just listening and speaking, you're not going to hear those weak, those articles, those prepositions. They're just going to fly by, because you're not supposed to, when you're listening to people, focus on, the grammar words, the function words.
The
what
keywords,
happens when you're reading is you're seeing them. So articles, which might be missing if you didn't read.
Yes.
Prepositions, which might, so that broken English, right? You're talking about in a first language speaker from California or a second language speaker, it's similar. If there's not reading going on, if you're not seeing the grammar, then it's
the writing, the writing. Because let's say in the lesson, they've given their summary. Let's say in a lesson, they've given their oral summary reaction, and they're more or less successful doing that with confidence. But when they actually have to write it, now they're starting to see the little grammar inaccuracies that come up that, I let go during the lesson because that was attention on spoken English. But once we shift attention to written English, then it's a chance to clean up the inaccuracies. I also want to throw out with writing at the lower levels also can happen. I've done this in my basic English series on YouTube with A2 level students. Have them write their own stories, their own short, basic, simple stories. It's a sense of ownership, sense of, their creativity is coming into play, and then they're invested because they wrote the story. Now we're going to read your story, and we're going to ask questions about your story. And it becomes a piece of language, a text that you can use multiple ways, and they wrote it.
Cool. Thank you so much for being here, bringing your questions to make it happen. And Jennifer, thanks a million. It's wonderful to work with you.
That's always a delight to be with you, Jace. And thank you, everyone, for being here. It's always fun to speak with other teachers. Ismania, thank you for being with me since 2007. Wow.
Yeah.
That's the true fan. That's the true fan right there.
Chavito, I think Chavito's also a veteran.
A fan?
Yeah, so that's great. And I know I am.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good
Samara, English Cool, Daniela, take care. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye, Samara.
Thanks so much. See you soon.